So, you know, watercolors is different than oils, different than acrylic, and that if it gets wet, it can change. So under glass or protected by a varnish will allow you not to have that happen. The MSA that's out there now has a UV white stabilizer, so you shouldn't get a yellowish on your varnish. If you're using iridescence, it can hide or make the iridescence dull because, again, you're affecting the light that's coming down. But it's just another way that you can, you know, display your artwork. So I said I would get back to that. So there we go. Hello, George. Hello, Besnick. So Besnick is going to be on with me tomorrow. Besnick does very, very fascinating art. Very similar to Anders in that he uses all types of brushes. And I think you're going to find it super, super interesting. So hello, Besnick. Anna, I see you on both. Hello. Claudia, hello. Claudia, that was your question, actually. Glass or no glass in humidity, again, up is really your choice. If you have glass and it has a backing to it, you're probably not going to get any humidity. So if it's under glass, there's some protection there. And if it's you have a varnish over it, there's some protection there. A little bit more, it's going to be more difficult to rework your paintings if you put varnish over the top of it. But if you're all done and you're done with the piece, that's certainly an option for you. Hello, Elisa. Okay, so what I thought I would do today, I'm going to put this down here. What I thought I would do today, so I talk about it a lot, many of you talk about it a lot. I thought I would just do some paint outs of the 238 dot card. It's pretty, it's a really marvelous tool because it allows you for a very reasonable price point. And I think Anna's going to pull hers out. It allows you to really see the color. I love showing you the colors. This is a real easy way to have a reference for yourself. So I thought we would play with it since we talk so much about it. And then I did say I would bring some pans. So I did go back into my closet and I took out 24 pans, and I'm certainly way open to play with these today as well. So I thought we would start with the 238 dot card. The 238 dot card, just so you know, is set up like the color chart. So let me put it in order so I can show you that. Then we'll just play with it. So the color chart here goes buff titanium, nickel titanate. It goes this way with the colors. The dot card does the same thing. However, it goes this way. Okay. So it's just a change of orientation, but the same kind of structure. So why don't we begin with this? You will find on the dot card, even lower for you here. You will find out on the dot card that it does have the information. It does have the series number. That's called John breaking his camera. Okay. It does have the series number, the SKU number, and it has the information that now you know how to read. It has the light fastness, whether it stains, whether it granulates, and the opacity. So you can see that information right there on your color chart. So why don't we play with it a little while?
John, can you explain the website? It has a watercolor and dot finder on the website.
So Gabriel, what do you mean by that?
I'm just on the Daniel Smith website, and I clicked under resources, and if I scroll down, it has a dot card finder.
So the dot card finder, I believe that lists the all the dot cards that we have, because we have it for many artists, and it would show you the artist, and it would also show you the dots on their dot card.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank
but
you.
I can verify that for you. In fact, I'll ask Ethel and who's on right now and Letiza to verify.
That's true. That's correct, John. I'm going to
Okay.
paste in our chat room because I think our guests here will be interested to look up for this resource. I'm going to paste the link in our chat. There you go.
So this one is the Azo Yellow. Thank you very much, Ethel. And thank you, Gabriel. Here's the Azo Yellow medium. So this is the buff titanium Azo Yellow. So you can do a very small painting. I mean, there's not a huge amount of paint, but there's enough easily to see what it looks like and what it feels like, which I think is always very useful. As I watch many of you, you're always kind of testing out the colors you're using on your artwork, which I think is pretty amazing. This just gives you a real easy way to have that available to you. This is permanent orange. Because I can explain all day long kind of what a color feels like, how fast it goes into solution. But I think as an artist, nothing beats actually seeing what it really looks like. So this is the Cad Red. The Cad Red is made up of multiple high performance pigments. Again, it's a Cad Red U. So you can go down any way you want. If you're going to follow the color chart, you'd actually go down this way. This is nickel titanate. Nickel titanate. That's bismuth. I'll put bismuth next to the Hansa. It's much brighter. Here's the pyro. We know the pyrols are super bright. This is pyro red. Pyro red, somebody asked me, what's the closest to fire engine red? They were doing a fire engine. It would be the pyro red. So the pyro red is closer to the color of a fire engine, at least here in the US. So if you're Gabriel and you're in San Diego, we're seeing the same kind of reds. We both have red fire engines. But if you're in Europe, you see different colors that we don't see here. You may see yellows and greens for your fire engines. But that's the closest to fire engine red. It's also kind of interesting because many people say, John, you have so many quinacridones, what's the difference in the colors? And nothing kind of beats actually seeing them. So this is quinacridone fuchsia. Quinacridone fuchsia. So I figure I would do maybe 10 on this page and then go to another page and just so we kind of go through the different pages. Here's Azo Yellow Deep. It also answers another question that you're always asking, which is a really good question. What would it look like if you had the color on the label? Well, I'm going to show you Naples. Some of the colors just look really plain, but you put water to them and they are unbelievably vibrant, right? It's that whole thing about watercolor. So if we look at the Mayan yellow, this is Mayan yellow. So Mayan yellow is that yellow which is infused into clay.
I think shadow violet is a good example. When you're looking at it, you're looking at this like gray violet kind of thing, but then like you get some water in it and you see what the magic. It's if you like the jadeite genuine, you'll like the shadow violet.
Yeah, it's amazing what they look like. So I'm going to find that one, Gabriel. I'm going to find the shadow violet so I can do that one where here's moon glow. There's shadow violet.
It's like the little brother of moon glow.
Yeah. So
Warmer.
there's the shadow violet. What? Let's see if it'll doesn't want to focus. So this one's shadow violet, this one's moon glow. And moon glow they're both 3 pigments. The moon glow is the anthracanoid red, the viridian, and the ultramarine blue. So the moon glow is going to have kind of a reddish or warmer, if you will, tint. So that's going to be, so I wetted out the moon glow, and now I'll put it over here.
This is all shadow violet right here in this painting that I did plein air today in San Diego.
Oh yeah, very cool. So the shadow violet has the ultramarine and the viridian, but it has the pyro orange, transparent pyro orange. Is that what you like? You like the orange tint versus the reddish tint?
Yeah, so if I'm like if I'm wanting more of a warmer gray, I'm gonna use that. But if I have like a nice cool morning, I'm gonna use the moon glow.
Very cool. Thank you. So let's do we've used spring green quite a few times. Let me do spring green, show you spring green. So spring green. The Andanthrone, that's going to be, you can see in Andanthrone how
plush.
it is. It's beautiful, and you can talk about it all the time, but when you see it, it's really beautiful to see. Hello, Misha. Hello, Renee. Again, there's 238 to play with. The answer to a lot of the questions, certainly be much easier over a cup of coffee to play with these dots. So I think for many of you, you can just get a color chart, and in your head, you can see the color, and now you know how to read the codes as to what the pigment is and whether it granulates or not. But if you also wanted to do this over a cup of coffee, you could actually go to the Parallel and say, I can see the characteristics, but I want to see what it looks like. And, it's going to be like the pyrroles. They're just super bright colors. And you lay them down. They're just bright.
I know there's a green olive that looks really good over some martinis.
Over martinis. So if we looked at for example, the organic vermilion. So now what's neat is not only can you see the color, but you would know the characteristics by just looking underneath it. And now those would have, I think for many of you, way more meaning because you know how to read it. And there's colors that you might not, that go certainly on the outside of your core colors. Ultramarine, French ultramarine, Hanzas, there's that core group of colors that many of you have on your palette. And then there's the next ring, there's colors, and then there's the next ring. So for some of you, Potter's Pink may be on that third ring, and you can actually look at what Potter's Pink looks like, characteristics of it, before you purchase it. Some of these, it depends on the pigment, how hard they're going to pack. So some of them it's good to, to wake them up. There, that is the Potter's Pink. So Sue says, how come sometimes that paint comes out of the tube when you open them? When we do the paint, so when we actually have the paint, the bottom of it is opened up. That's how we fill it. We fill it from the bottom to the top. So we fill it up. When we crimp it, there's a small little ear pocket here. And there has to be, because when you have something which is cylindrical, and then you make it into that shape, like a little football, you end up with a little ear pocket. And it depends on the heat, the pigment. That air bubble for some pigment is going to move. And as it moves from the top to the bottom, you can either pick up some gum arabic for some colors, not all colors, or that air bubble, the stuff is so thick it can't move. And when you open the tube, it tries to equalize. So the stuff coming out is just equalizing the pressure of that bubble. And then once it's equalized the first time, that's the end of it. You can do the same thing I'm doing here. You can keep the material that comes out, and it's absolutely usable. So this one is going to be Pyrrole Scarlet. Pyrrole Scarlet is a series 3. It's semi-transparent. It does not granulate. It's a 3. So would you expect that one to come off your paper? Would you expect that you'd be able to lift that one pretty easily? So as a 3, you wouldn't be able to lift it very easily. It's going to really stay down. So I think that's the power of the color chart, certainly the power of the dot cards. If you really love that color, but you wanted to create negative space, it's not a color that you would use because you can't lift it up. It also allows you to easily see, I really love, I love the Rose Madder Permanent. And I'm doing a transparent painting, and it's transparent. So Rose Madder Permanent. Bordeaux might be another one. See how fast it wets out. So that's the other thing we're seeing here. When I do this, you can see how fast, and it's all color. The color is all about the pigment, and it's how fast that pigment can disperse. Is how fast we're seeing this color do this, and that's all contingent upon the pigment. Mayan blue, again, Mayan is that it has that pigment infused into the clay. It's not a Primatech because it doesn't have a pedigree to it. It's not historic. Only the one Mayan genuine is historic. It has a pedigree to it, has a history to it. Quinacridones. So we have a pyrrole crimson and a quinacridone magenta. The quinacridone magenta is a non-granulating transparent, and it is a 3. So it's going to stain. Let's look at that one. And whether you painted it out or didn't paint it out, just because now you've been through the legend of how to read these, you would know right away kind of what it's going to do. So there we go. That's quinacridone magenta. And it's a transparent. If we look at the pyrrole, which we know pyrroles are going to be quite bright. We'd expect it to be bright, and it is in fact bright. And it's going to be semi-transparent. It's going to be a non-granulating color, and it's going to be a 3. So sometimes it's also a way for you to really show yourself that you do know how to read. And I would say, if you've been watching me for the last several months, you can read these quite well. So we can look at a permanent red. This will be a permanent red. This is semi-transparent. It's non-granulating. It's a 4. You don't see many 4s. So we would know this one pretty much is not going to move. It's a 4. And permanent red right below it, permanent red deep. So this is permanent red. I'm going to put permanent red deep, which is also non-granulating, but it is a 3. Permanent red deep. One of the colors I like a lot, painting my mouse as we do this. You're welcome, Sue. It's my pleasure. This is Iso-Indolene Yellow. Iso-Indolene Yellow, kind of a common name that we call it, is school bus yellow. Because the school buses here kind of have that, they're not really yellow, they're kind of an orange yellow, and this is almost a perfect match for the school buses. So down my street, that's what they look like. And we call it the Iso-Indolene because we're using the name of the chemistry house or person that created it. When we look at colors, if it's a single pigment color, then we use the name of the creator. If it's more than one pigment, then we can call it whatever we want to call it. This one's Azo Yellow. Sometimes on the color chart, you look at yellows and yellows just look like yellows. But when you paint them out, I'm sure you know this because you do this all the time, they're all different. They all have either a different characteristic or a different hue to them. This is one I really like. This is New Gamboge. New Gamboge is a 2, so it's slightly granulating. It has no granulation, and it's transparent. Do I have Naples Yellow? I do have Naples Yellow. Let's do Naples Yellow right now. So Ruth, let's do Naples Yellow. Naples Yellow is right here. Naples Yellow. The red is just my hands. So Naples Yellow. This is Indian Yellow. Indian Yellow, when it's dried, kind of looks like dried mustard, oxidized mustard. But when you wet it, it really comes to life. It's kind of one of the beautiful things about watercolor. So that's Indian Yellow. Indian Yellow.
John?
Yes.
There is you may have not noticed that Anna Marie asked a question in our Zoom chat. She said, why do we have the flexibility to call a paint whatever whatever we want to call it if it's a mix, or is there a tradition related to this?
So when we look at colors, if it's a single pigment, it's because I have chemists, it's the right thing to do when you're a chemist. You want to give homage to the person that made it. It's kind of like the right thing to do. If you're a parent, you call your child Charlie. I don't call him David. I call him Charlie because the creator of that beautiful child called him that, and that's what I'm going to call him as well. If it's a mixed, if it's a color that has more than one pigment and there's a history behind it, then we will call it the name of the history. Where that doesn't come into effect, for example, is moon glow. People say, why is it called moon glow? My chemists like that name. And then the same reason for shadow violet. So we try to go by one. If it's a single pigment, the person or entity that created it. If it's more than one, is there common usage of that name right now that has meaning to artists, then we would use that. And if there isn't a common usage or a common name, then we will give it a name. Very good question. So are you allowed to step away from tradition when naming a pigment? Absolutely. We don't. Can you? Absolutely. So, I mean, you can call it, there's lots of companies that have fun names. We don't do that. We want to have it meaning that you can look it up. It's easy if it's a single pigment for you to be able to look it up. If you look up Isoindolene Yellow, you will find the chemistry behind that color. And that's why we list the pigment as well. Not many of you will actually go to try to look it up, but if you wanted to, all the information is available to you. So you can actually go and read all about that particular pigment, learn about its history, etc. In the end, as a company, you can do kind of what you want because we're selling to professional artists and anybody that really wants to use the best. We want to make sure that we're giving the most information. Permanent yellow deep, when most of the ones that we call permanent, they're called permanent because early on when we were first getting into making watercolors, we had already been doing inks. We had already been doing, so this is permanent yellow deep, permanent yellow deep. We had already been doing oils at that time and all types of inks, litho inks, relief inks, etching inks. The company that was really into watercolors back in that day was Winsor Newton. And Winsor Newton was calling their colors permanent yellow, permanent red, etc., permanent green. And we did the same because our color was the same color. And we didn't want, we wanted to assure that artists could easily relate to the colors being the same colors. Since then, we just call it either the chemistry name or the common name. So Mayan orange, for example, Mayan orange, this is Mayan orange right here, Mayan orange. And Mayan orange was named by the professors at Texas that actually came up with the process of making the Mayan colors. So that's why we call it that, Mayan. Some of these colors would not have existed 30 years ago. I mean, there's new pigments coming into the marketplace all the time. At some point when COVID's over and I can go into the laboratory, I'll show you, we go through we probably get in on a weekly basis, oh boy, at least 5 new pigments a week. Now, if I came out with one color once a month, I think the retailers would kill me, because if you have to redo 260 tubes because one tube is new, nobody likes that. In fact, my own people don't like that. But I tell my chemists, you get whatever's out there in the marketplace and you have fun. Just like artists, I think you give people that are good at what they're doing, you give them the ability to have fun and be creative, and just good things happen. So there's never a lack of colors. The way that you can see that easily as just a regular person, just look at the colors around you in cars. When you see new car colors, you're seeing new pigments that are available. I mean, some will work, some won't work. Some have, this is going to be Paranone orange. Some have a solvent base to them. So there's a lot of chemistry that goes into place to make it an aqueous solution, or take it away from being a solvent system to a water-based system. A lot of chemistry involved in that. So, and therefore a lot of time involved in that. So it's not necessarily easy to do. This is Paranone orange. It's a really pretty orange. Not to lose you. So Naples Yellow. Let's see who asked the question. Joy, I think. So Naples Yellow has PW4, which is zinc white. It has PY97, pigment yellow 97. That's aerolide yellow. And it has PR101, which is Venetian red. So Naples Yellow is made up of zinc white. And because it has 3 pigments, kind of says which one is the most. That'd be zinc white, followed by the aerolide yellow, followed by the Venetian red. And then Anna Marie answered the same question. Thank you, Anna. Nice. So you guys are fast. Back this. Sometimes you ask about the most expensive color. It certainly is an expensive pigment in the Permatex series. It's also a difficult pigment or mineral to always have access to it. So we buy quite a bit of it in its mineral form, and that's rhodonite. Because a lot of the rhodonite we get from tailings. And a tailing is when they used to go after something. It's kind of like a gopher. When the miners went after something, they would leave overburden. And a lot of the rhodonite had no value. The gold and silver had value, but definitely back in the day, rhodonite didn't have any value. And now what mineralogists do is they'll go through the tailings and they'll pick out the rhodonite from the tailings. This is a Cad Red Scarlet. This is a life fastest 100 plus years. It's a 2 for the staining, which means it's going to be slightly staining. It's going to be non-granulating. I just picked up a bunch of it. And it's going to be semi-opaque. So here's kind of what we're ending up with as we do this, we're ending up with, not only can we see it here, we could do, make a color chart from this, but we also are ending up with this that we can post on our board. And as it dries, we would just have those as reference points. So Sue, each one, there's 4 of them. The first one is going to be for the light fastness, because that's really important to artists. This is going to be Quinacridone Violet. The second one is going to be your staining. And so the staining is important because sometimes as an artist, you're going to want to create negative space. You're going to want to pick up certain colors for whatever reason, either add a different color to the space that you just picked up, etc. The third one, for example, Misha, who's on right now, Misha doesn't use, to my discussions with him, he doesn't use granulating colors because he's a realist painter. So this is important. So he would look at this and say, I don't want colors that are granulating. They're very beautiful, but not for what I'm doing in my particular artwork. And then the last one, which is the transparency, there's a lot of, well, there's quite a few different societies or times where artwork is asked to be brought in, and they'll say for this particular show, it's transparent and all your colors need to be transparent. And so that's why transparency would matter. Transparency also would matter if you're doing a lot of layering. If it's transparent, you can do more layers than something which is semi-transparent. And once you're using a color which is opaque, you're kind of at the end of your story. So it's kind of like you're done when you use an opaque. Even when you use transparent, at some point, given you're doing the layering, you're going to get to opaque. Semi-transparent, at some point, 2, 3, you're going to get to opaque. So these are really useful over a cup of coffee. I think for you to have the most power before you ever pick up a brush to kind of help you with your creativity. Is it essential that you use them? No. Does it give you a lot of power? Is it a major, I think, benefit in your toolbox as an artist? Absolutely. It absolutely is. I think the more power you have, more understanding you have about your passion, it can't hurt. Now, if you're like me, I have a ton of tools on all these projects I'm going to do in my life, and my garage is full of tools. I know all about them. I just wish I had more time to do all the projects that I could do, but I still buy the tools and read about them all the time myself. So this is going to be permanent violet. Again, that kind of that permanent thing, permanent violet. And one of the beautiful things about watercolors is, is as they, I'm going to bring this up a little bit, as they dry, it's really the story is as they dry. So it's really neat to be able to look. Oh, go ahead.
I totally agree with you, John. But before I share what I was going to say, Giovanni was just pulling up his dot card. And I want to get his dot card and play around with that over a cup of coffee as well.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Yeah, so all the dot cards are listed. And you can, I think you can see front and back. So if you wanted to go to the artist's website, you could also go to Giovanni's website. George is on right now. You go to George's website. Besnick is on. You go to Besnick's website. So.
And back to what you were saying about knowing the card and knowing the color, whether it's opaque or transparent, is really helpful. Like in a painting I was working on today, I really need the color to get really opaque. And so I actually added some titanium gray in with okay, I got a little experimental, but I added in some titanium gray in with my genuine jadeite, because I really felt like that needed to go super opaque. And
Very cool.
I think it read well as a painting.
Oh, awesome. So many times I'm asked about gouache. And if you do just what Gabriel did, if you add the titanium white or the Chinese white, you can certainly make your colors much more opaque. So that's what a gouache would do, it'd be more opaque. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I was just, in the past, I was using a competitor's gouache. And I wanted to see if I can use your titanium gray, just keeping it in the family so that they would play well.
Oh, cool. Yeah, they're all PW6, so slightly different. But yeah, they should all work. So titanium white, the buff titanium, and the gray titanium should also work really well. That Chinese white is kind of the go-to child for doing that. And if I look on the color chart, while they're both very close to each other on the C-Lab, the Chinese white would tend to be a little warmer. But that's really up to your own, your own visual eye as to which one you want to use. So I have a question, and it's about the series numbers. So let me do Susan first. So Susan says, in the future, would you show brush outs from each of the master's artist sets? I would love to do that. Yeah. So I think I'll do that's a great suggestion. So Besnick is going to be tomorrow. I'm going to be too late for Besnick. But next week, what I'll do is I'll show that artist dot card before. I'll do that on Thursday because there's only probably 18 colors for each one. And then you'll see that artist on Friday. I'd love to do that. We'll be glad to do that. And then Sue says, and the series numbers, what do those decide? The series numbers on the tube and on the color chart, these big numbers right here. So that's a 2 and that's a 3. Those kind of give the retailer, it's from a manufacturer, what I'm doing there is showing me the cost for me to make that color. Primitex they're costly to make because when they rip apart my machines, every 2 years I have to replace one of the machines, and it's about $45,000 to replace the mill heads, and then the time. So some of them are very difficult to make. If we look at ultramarine blue, it's $9 a kilo, about $4.50 a pound. It's a beautiful color, not super difficult to make. If I look at the lapis, it's roughly about $1,200 a pound, 2,000 something a kilo, and very difficult to make. So I try to, in terms of volume, etc., push everything to a 1 or a 2, but there's just some things I cannot do. I mean, they're just, when I'm making pigment from semi-precious stones, it's impossible to do. So that's kind of what that means. Let's see, I'm trying to do both sides here. So one of the things that this can show you really quick, which we've gone over together a lot, is when you look at the parallenes, you can see how quickly, so this is going to be parallene violet. One, they're going to go into solution very quickly. It's kind of that family does that. Violet. We're going to go into solution really quickly, and they're very vibrant. I would say the pyrroles are more vibrant than the parallenes, but the parallenes are certainly a life to the party. The ones that are going to be the most intense, and we'll do a couple here in a second, are going to be the phthalos. This is Alizarin Crimson. So Alizarin Crimson is a 4 for light fastness. It's one of 2 colors. And that's because Alizarin Crimson is a historic color. It is a coal tar derivative. Coal tar derivative. It was used by the masters. There it is right there. And people ask me, well, it's only 2 that I have. Why do you have that? And I have it because the masters used it. And a lot of professors who are extremely knowledgeable about colors, etc., want their students to have the same paint that the masters used. Now, additionally, I would have the permanent Alizarin Crimson, which I'll put right next to Alizarin Crimson. And this is a light fastness of 1. So light fastness of 1. Alizarin Crimson, permanent Alizarin Crimson. And you can just take your choice as to which one you want to use. The other color that is a 4 or fugitive, and a fugitive is going to 15, 20 years. If you put it under UV glass, it's going to, or conservative glass, it's going to last longer. It's going to be the opera pink. And I made the opera pink specifically for the Botanical Society. It's a pretty color. And so the opera pink is interesting in that the opera pink, it's a series 1. It's made up of 2 pigments. It's made up of Quinacridone Magenta is the first pigment. And there's a fluorescent pigment, which is the second one. So it has PR 122, which is the quinacridone. Because the quinacridone magenta is listed as the first color, it has more of the quinacridone magenta. The reason it looks like this is that the fluorescent is much more vibrant. So you're really seeing the fluorescent, but underneath that is the quinacridone magenta. And I'm asked about this one. So with the Alizarin Crimson, that would fade out after 15, 20 years. With the opera pink, while the fluorescent can go away, right? If you have it in sunlight over 15, 20 years, not behind conservation glass, for example, the quinacridone magenta will not. So you would lose this fluorescent, but you wouldn't lose the total color behind it. You would just lose this fluorescent, okay? So Besnick says, many artists and like the opera pink in Istanbul. I heard you have.
And it's got granulation.
So there is granulation to the opera pink. So remember how granulation works, because we're dealing with you as many of you as professional artists, we want to let you know, even if there's the slightest bit of granulation, if there's the slightest bit, we're going to say yes. Right, so you have something that is like Minnesota pipestone, which is almost imperceptible to granulation, to something, for example, like a lunar black or a green apatite, which is, oh my God, in heaven, you can see granulation 35 feet away, right? So if there's any type of granulation, we tell you that because you really want to know that as an artist. If you're a realist painter like Misha and you want no granulation, then it's important that we say if it's an N, there is no granulation. There's a caveat to that. And the caveat to that is a color can be non-granulating if you use too much water. And that is always, I can't tell you what that is, because you'd have to feel that as an artist. But if you use too much water, you can cause a color that doesn't granulate to granulate, because what you're doing is you're kind of deconstructing what we've done as a manufacturing company, where we have put the pigment within a gum arabic matrix and coated it. When you're adding way too much water, whatever that happens to be, you can take that gum arabic away from the particle and the particles would separate and you'd see granulation. Does that happen on a normal basis? No, it'd be very abnormal. You would just have to put a huge amount of water. And that's the kind of the beautiful thing about whether you're doing it this way with the dot card or you're going to use 6 different colors to do your painting, and on another piece of paper, you're just playing with those colors to see how they behave with each other, which is super important. You will kind of answer those questions to yourself. I mean, that's kind of the beautiful thing about this playing. Or the super important intellectual study. It's not, it's playing. So earth, I love earth color. These are the earth colors right here. Lots of the earth colors. And kind of thing I like about these, if we look at the Quinacridone Sienna, looks kind of, the watercolors always look really interesting when they're dry, but when you wet them out, kind of like what you're saying, Gabriel, they come alive. I mean, it's just the beautiful thing about watercolors. That's our buff titanium, and that is Quinacridone Sienna. So here's the Minnesota pipestone. Minnesota pipestone has this really kind of I don't quite know how to have my brush not pick up all my paint. I think I need to quit touching it. This is Quinacridone Gold. I'm kind of in the business of wearing out my machinery. It's kind of the beautiful thing. If you're in manufacturing, it's what you do. So Gabriel, what color is that?
Pipestone.
Pipestone. Oh yeah, awesome. Awesome.
Does that make you want to come visit us in San Diego?
You know, there's no reason I would do that no matter what. I love San Diego. I grew up in Huntington Beach, so kind of your neighbor to the north by a little ways.
Right.
So
San Diego misses you, so come visit.
Although the weather here in Seattle right now, it's kind of like what I like about San Diego. Most of the time is that 70-degree weather. It's about 75 here, so it's actually quite nice. It's really nice. But we don't have the Point Loma, lighthouse, although we have quite a few lighthouses. There's something pretty magical about San Diego. It's a beautiful place you live in. This is burnt yellow.
Angela lives in a beautiful place too.
She does. I visited her with Catherine probably, I think 2 or 3 years ago in Girona, and it was gorgeous. Yeah. And then Giovanni, who's on right now in Italy, and that was beautiful. And Misha in Moscow. You all live in great places. I really miss traveling and when I was younger, it used to be going to see things, like seeing architectural structures. And then when I hit probably 45, it was seeing cultures. And then when I hit probably 55, it was seeing people and friends. It's really not so much the places anymore, and it's certainly not the things anymore. It's just meeting with people that I have great friendships with. And that I really, really miss. Zoom is really good. You can see people, but it's not like it's going to be that far before we're able to do that again.
Miss you, John, around the world.
So this is hematite. Hematite's interesting because if you've used the hematite and you've watched it dry, it has this really interesting yellow undertone to it. So this is a perylene, so it's going to be brightish. This is perylene maroon. Perylene maroon. Perylene maroon. One of you said every time you want to say that word, just think of Maroon 5, the band, and that's kind of the only way I get that word out of my mouth. So this is perylene maroon, and it has a light facets of 1. And it is a 4. That's going to be a major stainer. Do any of you, when you look at your colors, make conscious choices of which ones you're going to use in terms of staining? Is there a color that you wouldn't use? Does that come into your selection process? Yeah, the best effect, so George says the best effect is when the hematite is from the tube. Absolutely. So this is sepia. Absolutely. I'm careful with phthalos. Let's get some phthalos. So this is a neutral tint. Believe it or not, we've gone through all these colors probably, I think we're on our 3rd time of doing these. So this right here, neutral tint. So this is a phthalo green blue shade. Phthalo green blue shade. Phthalo green blue shade. So Claudia says, yes, when you know you want to lift a color, you don't use staining colors. Anna Marie, are there some that you stay away from? I'm careful with phthalos because they can be overpowering. Yeah, they are definitely the life of the party. They let you know they're there. I mean, look at that. I mean, they just. So this is phthalo blue red shade.
I know we've been talking a lot about lifting some of these colors, whether we're lifting stains or not. But
Yeah.
there's another technique that I really enjoy is actually dropping droplets of water onto some of the staining colors and seeing what they do. And it's pretty magical.
Oh, if you send me a couple of colors, I'll do that next week.
Got it.
That'd be great. This one's quinacridone purple. Quinacridone purple. So there'll be some artists coming up. And when I was doing in the artist studios, I would notice that when they turned their work over, they would have every color listed and individually shown out like this, brushed out. Then they would have them brushed out with the ones they thought they're going to use as mixes. And it was so interesting to see. Okay, so boy, that time went by quick. Thank you so much. Tomorrow, Besnick will be with me. Besnick's on right now. Phenomenal. He's let me put this up so you can see me. He uses all types of brushes, some really huge brushes to do really big strokes. It does a lot of when I was with him at the studio, he was doing a lot of abstracts. Just awesome. So any questions you have, you might want to go to his site and look at his work so you can ask him questions. Just like all of the brand ambassadors, he's very giving. He'll answer all the questions that you may have. So with that, thank you all from the YouTube side and the Zoom side. And Anna, thank you. Mark, thank you. Thank you, Gabriel. It's good seeing you all. And I'll see you tomorrow. Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, bye-bye, everybody.
Yo.